People were lining up outside a small office in Boston. Not to withdraw money, to give it away. A broke immigrant was about to take in more cash in 6 months than most banks in the city, then disappear with most of it, and give his name to a pattern that never went away. This is Libromastro, History's Accounts. Every empire kept a ledger. We open them. Carlo Ponzi was born in 1882 in Parma, Italy. He arrived in Boston in 1903, 21 years old, with $200 in his pocket, or so he later claimed. He spoke very little English. What followed was 17 years of drifting. He worked as a waiter and got fired for shortchanging customers. He moved to Montreal and worked at a bank, and went to prison for forging checks. He came back into the United States illegally, got caught smuggling Italian immigrants, served 2 more years. By 1917, he was back in Boston, 35 years old, broke, with a criminal record on both sides of the border. He tried small businesses, a trade publication, an export catalog. Nothing worked. And then, sometime in 1919, he received a letter from a company in Spain. Inside the envelope, there was a small piece of paper, a coupon. That coupon changed everything. The coupon was called an International Reply Coupon. It was a system created by the Universal Postal Union to make international correspondence easier. You're in Spain, you want someone in America to write back, but you don't have American stamps. You buy one of these coupons at your local post office. The recipient in America can exchange it for return postage. What Ponzi noticed was a price discrepancy. Because of post-war inflation, currencies had moved out of sync. A coupon bought in Italy or Spain for the equivalent of 1 US cent could be exchanged in the United States for 6 cents in stamps, up to 6 times the value, just by buying coupons in Europe and redeeming them in America. It was a real arbitrage. The math worked on paper. There was one problem. The problem was that it didn't scale. You couldn't actually move millions of these coupons across borders, exchange them at post offices, and turn stamps into cash. The logistics were impossible. Ponzi noticed this too. Either he didn't fully understand it, or he chose to ignore it. Either way, he didn't build a postal coupon business. He built something else. In December 1919, Ponzi founded a company. He called it the Securities Exchange Company. The pitch was simple. Give me your money. In 45 days, I'll give you back 50% more. $100 in, $150 back. 6 weeks later. If you didn't reinvest, that's a quadrupling of your money in a year. If you did, and most of his investors did, it was many times that. His explanation? I'm exploiting the postal coupon arbitrage. The returns are real. The mechanism is real. The profit is real. The mechanism was real. The profit was not. Because Ponzi never actually bought postal coupons in any meaningful volume. What he was doing, whether he admitted it to himself or not, was paying early investors with money from new investors. No actual trade, no actual arbitrage, just a flow of cash that worked as long as new money kept coming in faster than old money went out. In the first month, a handful of friends invested small amounts. Word spread. By February, he had agents selling his notes across Boston. By July, he was taking in $1 million a week. In today's money, call it $14 million. Every 7 days. For 6 months in 1920, Charles Ponzi was the most talked about man in Boston. People mortgaged their houses to invest. Priests sent him their parish's savings. Police officers handed over their pension funds. A journalist wrote that Ponzi had done the thing the big financial houses said couldn't be done. He bought a mansion in Lexington, Massachusetts. He bought a minority stake in the Hanover Trust Bank, which gave him a bank connection and made the whole thing look more legitimate. He wore expensive suits, drove expensive cars, gave interviews in which he was charming, confident, and entirely vague about the actual mechanics of the business. At his peak, he employed dozens of agents and had taken in the equivalent of about $150 million in today's money. And he was completely insolvent. For every dollar he paid out, he was taking in slightly less than he needed. The only way to keep going was to keep growing. Stop growing, and the whole thing collapses. In July 1920, a Boston newspaper started asking questions. On July 26, 1920, the Boston Post published a front-page story questioning whether Ponzi's returns were mathematically possible. 2 days later, Ponzi hired a public relations man and held a press conference. He was calm. He was charming. He invited journalists to inspect his books. The Massachusetts Bank Commissioner ordered an audit. For about 10 days, Ponzi managed to maintain the illusion. He kept paying out investors. He gave more interviews. He countersued the newspaper for libel. Then, on August 10th, the Post published a second investigation. They had found his criminal record. The forgeries in Montreal, the smuggling conviction. Investors started demanding their money back. In 2 days, Ponzi paid out $2 million in redemptions. The Hanover Trust Bank, which held some of his deposits, started collapsing. On August 12, 1920, less than 8 months after he founded the Securities Exchange Company, federal agents raided his office. The total amount owed to investors? About $15 million. Roughly $200 million today. The actual assets? A fraction of that. Charles Ponzi was arrested and charged with mail fraud. Here's the part that usually gets lost. Ponzi did not invent the scheme that bears his name. The mechanism, using new investor money to pay old investors with no underlying business, had existed before him. There are documented cases going back to the late 1870s. A woman named Sarah Howe ran one in Boston in 1879. A man named William Miller ran one in Brooklyn in 1899 and was called 520% Miller for the returns he promised. What Ponzi did was run his version at a scale and speed nobody had matched. He did it publicly, in daylight, with a plausible-sounding explanation. Size, speed, a veneer of legitimacy. That combination is what made his name stick. There's also a question historians still argue about. Did Ponzi know from the beginning that it was a fraud? The evidence suggests he started by genuinely believing the postal coupon arbitrage could work. Then, as money poured in faster than any real business could absorb it, he made a choice, conscious or not, to keep going. To pay the early investors, take a large cut, and hope the whole thing would sort itself out. It's a pattern that repeats in almost every large fraud since. Not a cold, calculated deception from day one, a small lie, then a bigger one, then a structure that can only survive by lying. Ponzi served 3.5 years in federal prison. Then Massachusetts prosecuted him again. He jumped bail, fled to Florida, tried to run a real estate scheme, got caught, and served more time. He was deported to Italy in 1934. He spent his last years in Brazil, working as a translator and a minor airline employee. He died in Rio de Janeiro in 1949 in a charity ward. With $75 to his name, about $900 today, not enough for a week's rent in the city he once owned. The scheme that carries his name never went away. Bernie Madoff ran his version for decades. When it collapsed in 2008, his books showed $65 billion in client accounts. The actual losses to investors were closer to $20 billion, the largest fraud in history either way. It was discovered only because the 2008 financial crisis forced him to start paying out more than he was taking in. Same mechanism, same collapse trigger. And smaller versions run constantly, in every country, in every era. Cryptocurrency tokens, investment clubs, online trading platforms. The structure is always the same. Returns that are too good to be real, paid for by the next person in line. The postal coupon was never the point. The promise was. High returns, a credible explanation, a crowd of people who wanted to believe. That combination is apparently timeless. The story of Charles Ponzi is not a story about a man who invented a fraud. It is a story about what gets people to give their money away. He died with $75, but the structure outlived him. Sarah Howe, William Miller, Bernie Madoff. The next one nobody has named yet. The next time you hear about a return that sounds too good to be true, paired with an explanation that's almost plausible, remember, a broke immigrant did it in Boston in 1920. He just did it bigger. This is Libromastro, history's accounts. We're just reading them.